Here is something most people do not know about American elections. The presidential election, the one that gets all the attention, all the coverage, all the drama, is not where the most consequential policy decisions get made. That happens here. The midterm elections. Every 2 years, the entire House of Representatives and 1/3 of the Senate go up for re-election. No presidential race, no top-of-ticket drama pulling people to the polls, just Congress. And Congress is where your money gets taxed, where your healthcare gets regulated, where military decisions get funded, and where every major piece of legislation either lives or dies. If you have ever searched for midterm elections explained for beginners, or if you have followed politics for years and still feel like midterms do not quite make sense, this video is built specifically for you. By the end of the next 10 minutes, you will understand exactly how midterm elections work, what is structurally at stake in 2026, and how to follow this election cycle the way a statesman would, not the way cable news wants you to. Before we get into the specifics of 2026, I want to be clear about what this video is and what it is not. This is not a prediction video. I am not going to tell you which party is going to win. I am not going to tell you which candidate to support. And I am not going to frame this through a partisan lens. What I am going to do is give you the structural mechanics of how midterm elections work, the historical patterns that consistently shape their outcomes, and the specific stakes of the 2026 cycle, so that when you follow this election, you are following it as an informed analyst rather than as a partisan spectator. Here is what we are covering. 1, what midterm elections actually are and why they exist structurally. 2, the single most consistent historical pattern in American midterm elections and what it tells us about 2026. 3, what is actually at stake in this cycle and why it matters to you personally. 4, the races worth watching and how to evaluate them without partisan bias. And 5, how a statesman follows an election cycle. What to read, what metrics to track, and what questions to ask. This is the 2026 elections breakdown. Let us start at the foundation. What are midterm elections and why do they exist? The United States holds federal elections every 2 years. In presidential election years, voters elect a president alongside congressional representatives. In the years between presidential elections, the midterm years, there is no presidential race. Voters elect only members of Congress. Every single one of the 435 seats in the House of Representatives is up for election every 2 years. Every House member faces the voters in every midterm and every presidential election year. The Senate operates differently. Senators serve 6-year terms, and the Senate is divided into 3 groups called classes that face election in rotation. This means roughly 1/3 of the Senate is contested in any given election year. In 2026, specifically, the team should verify and insert the exact number of Senate seats being contested at time of production, as this figure is publicly available from the Senate website and should be confirmed before filming. Now, here is the structural point that matters most for understanding how midterm elections work. Because there is no presidential race at the top of the ticket pulling voters to the polls, midterm elections consistently produce lower voter turnout than presidential elections, and lower turnout changes the composition of who actually decides the outcome. Historically, midterm electorates tend to be older, more politically engaged, and more ideologically motivated than presidential year electorates. That structural reality shapes every campaign strategy in every midterm cycle. Now I want to show you what I consider the single most consistent and most underreported pattern in American political history. The party that controls the White House almost always loses seats in the midterm elections. This is not a partisan observation. It has happened under Democratic presidents and Republican presidents. It happened during economic booms and during recessions. It has been the dominant pattern in American midterm elections for well over a century. Why does this happen? Political scientists offer several explanations, and I want to give you all of them rather than one. The first explanation is called surge and decline. Presidential elections produce a surge of enthusiasm for the winning party voters who come out specifically for that candidate. In the midterms, that surge subsides and the winning party loses the voters who came out specifically for the president. The second explanation is referendum dynamics. Midterm elections function partly as a national referendum on the sitting president's performance. Voters who are dissatisfied with the direction of the country tend to express that dissatisfaction by voting against the president's party, regardless of which party that is. The third explanation is opposition motivation. The party out of power tends to be more motivated to vote in midterms than the party in power because opposition drives turnout more reliably than satisfaction. All three of these dynamics are in play in every midterm cycle, and all three of them are relevant to 2026. Understanding this pattern does not tell you who will win in 2026, but it tells you what structural forces are already in play before a single vote is cast, and that is the beginning of genuine political analysis. So what is actually at stake in the 2026 cycle? I want to answer this structurally, not in terms of which party benefits, but in terms of what actually changes depending on the outcome. Scenario one party emerges from 2026 controlling both the House and the Senate. In this scenario, the controlling party has significantly greater capacity to advance its legislative agenda. Budgets, spending bills, and policy legislation move more efficiently through a unified Congress. Committee chairmanships, which control what gets investigated, what gets funded, and what gets heard, are entirely in one party's hands. This does not mean the controlling party can do anything it wants. The filibuster, presidential veto power, and internal party divisions all constrain what is possible. But unified control of Congress is a meaningfully different governing environment than divided control. Scenario two, control of the two chambers is split between the parties. In this scenario, major legislation becomes significantly more difficult to pass. The two chambers must agree on identical bill text before anything reaches the president. When one chamber is controlled by one party and the other by the opposing party, that agreement requires genuine bipartisan compromise, which is rare in the current political environment. The practical result of a divided Congress is typically a legislative slowdown. Existing law largely stays in place. Major new initiatives from either party are difficult to advance, and government funding negotiations, the debt ceiling, continuing resolutions, spending bills become sites of significant political conflict. Either scenario has direct implications for tax policy, regulatory priorities, healthcare, and a range of issues that affect your finances, your industry, and your daily life. That is not a partisan statement. That is a structural one. Here is the section most political coverage never gives you. Not who is winning, not who you should want to win, but how to actually follow this election cycle as an intelligent, informed observer. 5 specific practices. 1, track the generic ballot, not individual polls. Individual race polls are noisy, expensive to conduct properly, and frequently inaccurate. The generic congressional ballot, which asks voters simply whether they intend to vote for the Democrat or the Republican in their congressional district, gives a cleaner read on the national environment. Track that number over time, not individual snapshots. 2, watch the money. Campaign finance disclosures are public record and are filed with the Federal Election Commission on a regular schedule. Where serious money is flowing tells you which races the parties themselves believe are genuinely competitive. Follow the money before you follow the polls. 3, identify the structural seats, not the marquee names. Cable news covers the most dramatic personalities. A statesman watches the seats that will actually determine majority control, the genuinely marginal districts where either party could plausibly win. Identify those seats early and track them specifically. 4, read primary results carefully. The primaries tell you what each party's base actually wants, which is often different from what general election candidates publicly campaign on. Primary results in 2026 will signal what each party's legislative priorities will be if they gain or retain power. 5, ignore election night drama. With mail-in voting and extended counting processes, election night results in competitive races are frequently not final. A statesman waits for certified results before drawing conclusions. Reacting to incomplete election night data is exactly what partisan media wants you to do. Here is the gentleman's verdict on the 2026 midterm elections. This cycle matters not because of the personalities involved, not because of the partisan drama, but because of the structural reality that Congress controls the policy environment that directly affects your finances, your industry, and your future for the next 2 years. A man who understands how midterm elections work, who can read the historical patterns, track the structural signals, and evaluate the stakes without partisan bias, is watching a fundamentally different election than the man consuming cable news commentary. One is following a reality show, the other is reading a balance sheet. Congress 2026 elections will be analyzed on this channel throughout the cycle, nonpartisan, structural, statesman level. Subscribe so you do not miss any of it. And if you want to go deeper, if you want to build the kind of political intelligence that makes every election, every debate, and every political headline readable at a level most people never reach, my one-on-one coaching program and my online course are both in the description below. The course is available now at kentpolitics.com/courses lifetime access for $997. The coaching program and application are at kentpolitics.com/coaching and kentpolitics.com/application. My name is Kent Tran. This is The Political Gentleman. I will see you in the next video where we go back to the 19th century to look at how Lincoln, Bismarck, and Tocqueville approached political analysis. And I promise you their methods are more useful in 2026 than anything cable news is offering.